The Standing Committee on Utilities will come to order. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairman Kidd.
Present.
Vice Chair Bromley. Present. Representative Engel. Atchison. Black. Here. Brown. Here. Fitzwater. Lewis. Here. Query. Here. Simmons. Yes.
We do have a quorum. We'll now start in a hearing House Bill 1734. Representative O'Donnell, are you ready?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman. I'm an Eagle Scout, always prepared. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Utilities Committee. I am Michael O'Donnell. I represent the southernmost part of St. Louis County, and I am here to present House Bill 1734.
I'm going to ask you to speak in the mic a little bit more because we do stream this.
Sounds good. All righty. So for those of you who were here before me, this may look familiar. So this is a bill that you all passed out and became law back in 2018. And so what you'll see in the bill is some changes that are made from that and some of the dates that are affiliated with this. What I'll start off by saying is the first section of the bill, 386-266, we are simply we're going to remove from the bill. There was Ameren had started off thinking, hey, we don't use this, we're just going to strike it. But we had Spire and Liberty come back and say, hey, we'd really like to leave that in there. So when you all see the committee sub, you just won't see any of 386-266. It'll just, that whole section. Yeah, so the bill, and I'm excited about this because the bill will become 6 pages shorter, which is really exciting for a utility bill, right? So I'll just kind of go through some of the things that the bill does, and then I'll let some of the smart folks kind of give you some of the better details. The last time I was before this committee was 3 years ago, and it was a great hearing because we spent about an hour talking about bonds, but which is one of my favorite topics. But there'll be no discussion of bonds today. This is strictly about our constituents, the ratepayers of the utilities. First off, one of the things that this bill does is it makes it so the utilities are accurately accounting for property taxes in their rates. And I really didn't realize this, but when rates are set, they're very similar to the way your property taxes are set. They're set on a certain date, and you move forward. So when the utilities have their rates set by the PSC, they look at their current property taxes, for example, and say, okay, you're paying this. We're going to factor that into your rate. But what this will do is it will allow them to recapture. I didn't realize that because of that setting, you could actually have cases where the utility is either over collecting or under collecting in their rates, and so your ratepayers could actually be paying more than the utility is actually paying in taxes. And so what this will do is this will set up an account where they're essentially tracking that, and it will be made up in the next rate case. Also, probably my favorite part and the part that I was most excited about in the bill, there are some economic development rate incentives, or you'll hear them referred to as EDRIs.
What sections are you talking about?
And that section is 393-1640. I can get you a page number here. Gonna be. Yep, bottom of page 9 is where those starts. And what they're doing there is, we in the legislature are always looking for opportunities to provide economic development incentives, and a lot of times that comes through tax incentives. But what the utilities are doing here is they're looking at large users of electricity and saying, if you're going to be a large user, we're going to give you a discount. And the way that's structured, this is the part I really like. The way it's structured is the discount is tied to the variable costs of the utility. So you're bringing in a large utility, excuse me, a large business, and they're going to get a discount off of the variable costs of the utility, but the fixed costs they're going to share in. So all of our constituents, your ratepayers in the home, they're going to see technically see their rates go down because you've got this big user coming online to share in those fixed costs, but they're getting a discount in their variable costs. And I thought that was a pretty awesome way to structure it. And then the last item I have here is the rate cap deferrals. So in the plant and service accounting, and that's a lot of what this bill originally was about, was this system of accounting. What it allows for is when the utilities build some type of facility, you say they're building a large power plant, there's what they call rate cap deferrals, and so any taxes, interest, depreciation will be held in an account, so that any overages they can recoup those, but there's also a cap on those, so it doesn't incentivize them to have cost overruns, but it gives them some capability to recoup some of that. So that is the bulk of the bill. The other thing I have on here too is there is a portion in there. So when this was originally established, there were some sunset provisions put in here, and an opportunity for the PSC to look at how the PISA is working. Is it working? Do we have concerns? Are there problems? And it gave them a chance to look at that. We feel that they've looked at that, but and so we've removed those sunsets. But happy to talk about those and going forward.
Okay. I have a question for you on page 6, line 9. Makes it easier for everybody. I hope we're all on the same version there. These costs you have in here, and we've talked about this line. It says without any offset. I'm still concerned about that language. Have you seen anything yet? Have we got any language that... because without offset means that no adjustments can be made to this. I'd like to give at least the PSC the permission to look at that.
Right. Yeah, and I have not seen anything back from the PSC, and
okay.
I think you've expressed your concerns to the utilities as well. And the other change that you all will see is the rate discount structures are in the bill, and it kind of defines what the percentages are. We'll see some changes in there. Right now there's 3 tiers. That's going to go to 2 tiers, and we'll include that in the committee sub too. So I forgot to mention that.
We had talked also about economic development, a way to tie this to economic development. Have you got any? And this might be a little premature on your language, some of the language, I'm sure, but have you reconsidered that?
Yeah, I think we identified that because I think the good example you gave in conversation was we don't want to encourage Bitcoin miners to come here, set up shop, rate shop, get a great rate for a while, and then pack up and move on. Those guys aren't doing anything for the state of Missouri. They're not providing jobs. They're not providing tax base. They're just using cheap power, and we don't want to incentivize those folks. The very start of that section, and I would venture to guess there's someone that will come after me.
Which section?
It actually talks about tying it to economic development incentives that the state offers. So this isn't just going to be Ameren looking at it saying, yeah, we think this is an economic development impact, and we want to give these folks this discount. They're going to actually have to qualify for some economic development incentives at the state level as well.
Yeah, because one of the things we didn't want to do, if we're going to allow them to attract business by making rates different, one thing I don't want to rate shift to consumers. We want to make sure that there are not only incentives but buyback clawbacks that say, hey, if you don't do this, what I didn't want to happen is somebody coming in here from extended from 5 years to 7 years or and they shall apply for 10 years. I don't want to come in here for 9 years, 364 days, and then
Right, buying cheap power.
and then in the meantime, the consumers have eaten up some of that.
And
And
the utilities don't want that either, right? Because they'll put the infrastructure in place to create that extra load, only to have those people pull out after the fact. The incentives, we would like to see these people be businesses in the state of Missouri beyond the discount dates.
We also want to make sure that any extra, I think this is already done, but if they have to do any more construction or anything else in there, that also is passed on to the client that they're going to build the facilities for, not to other users.
Oh, so yeah, if they're running new lines and things like that.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that I'm not that I haven't gamed out yet.
Okay. I'm sure I can see that we also have a Senate hearing at the same time on this same bill, so I see the smart people came here this morning.
I needed the support, Mr. Chairman. That's why.
Any questions for this witness? I'm sure we've got a few people that will clarify a bunch of these things too. Representative McQuarrie, proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning, lady.
So, a lot of folks up here weren't around when this bill passed. I did not support it in 2018 when it passed. And the only thing that sort of felt like a bit of a win for consumers is there was the sunset put in there so that we could look at the data and evaluate things. And, just to be honest with you, and I expressed this, privately to you earlier, I feel like a compromise was made. There was this little bitty thing to protect consumers where we were going to have a sunset, take in the data, evaluate things, and then see if it was actually working the way it was marketed to us. And so, and this hasn't even kicked in yet. So I'm really wondering why you are removing the sunset.
I think the logic there was they're using it, it's working, but I think
it's not kicked in yet.
Okay,
it's
well,
not even
that's a
kicked in yet.
misunderstanding on my part. But I would say that I don't know that's off the table.
Okay, so you might be open
certainly,
to.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
this is
I mean,
not in its final
this
form,
is one
for
of
sure.
the challenges with term limits is, some of the folks that were here that made that deal over on the Senate side, this little, it's not even a nugget, like a sliver of a consumer protection, to take that out before we're even seeing, PISA fully implemented and kicked in, I just feel like it kind of goes against, what this building's about.
I absolutely understand. And like I said, the bill's certainly not in its final form.
Okay. And then the other question I have, and maybe there's other folks in the audience, but my understanding is that if a business wants to come here and be, a big user, commercial user, that they can already negotiate and get a special rate.
That would certainly be something to ask one of the people that follow me. That's
okay. So I'm trying. I'd love to understand.
I mean, these incentives are here. So the incentives, there's an incentive in here that's already in statute. We're just expanding it because it sounds to me like they had people coming to them saying, we're not quite here. Is there some kind of discount? And it sounded to me like they weren't allowed to do that. And so so we wanted to expand the scope of who qualified. So if you weren't quite up to that level, there's a second tier that. And actually, there was.
I'd like to understand that more thoroughly, and I'm certainly not opposed to a big customer coming in because it ultimately helps our constituents. Because I would love for a Noranda to kick in again or something like that.
I love the sharing of those fixed costs because that means
yeah,
it's coming.
I would too. I mean, because it really helps the rate class that I care about. So anyway, thank you, and I hope to continue the discussion.
I look forward to working with you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Representative Brownlee,
To inquire, please.
proceed.
So there's a section in here on this economic development part on when industry is projected to come in, they're projecting how much electricity they're going to be using. And there's several benchmarks on that for load factors and different things of that nature. Who actually monitors that? How is that reconciled? if I come in, I say my factory that's going to use 5 megawatts is going to be at 70% load factor, how does that come back and correlate? And if we don't meet those requirements, is that money, those incentives, do they disappear? Or it looks to me like some of those incentives stay in there for a part. But anyway, could you go through some of that?
I cannot. In the spirit of yours and my military service, that's above my pay grade, but I'm sure there's somebody here that can go into better detail. That's a question I've really not heard anybody ask yet, but I think it's important and
Okay,
certainly
thank you.
deserves an answer.
Any other questions for this witness? All right, seeing none. We're going to alternate back and forth on this. I'm going to start with now someone who is against the bill. Is anyone here testifying against the bill?
If no one else will step up.
You're the lone person this morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is John Kaufman. I represent the Consumers Council of Missouri, and my interest is with that of the residential class. And I'd like to make sure that you keep in mind as you are looking at this legislation the thousands of people who are having trouble paying their utility bills right now. There's still a lot of people recovering from the pandemic, and with every increase in electric rates, there's a certain number of people that drop off and can, they are no longer able to pay their bills. And
Once again, can you?
Oh, yeah, is that
yes,
better?
No, yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So yes, I was asking you to keep in mind vulnerable customers and just the residential customer class as a whole. There's several things going on with this bill, and I don't even have time to get into them all. I would say my first concern is the one mentioned by Representative McCreary, and that is the sunset. There was a lot of debate about how much information was going to be in this legislation, and that.
Would you please reference a page number and a line number, please?
Is on. Maybe it's the other one I marked up. Back here. That would be on page 12, line 100. There are certain things that are to happen in 2024, and then the law is to expire on a sunset of 2028. And the law, the really dramatic thing that has benefited the electric utilities, and which they're very excited about because it benefits their bottom line, is this thing called PISA, the Public In-Service Accounting. And it's a benefit that I think no other state has allowed their electric utilities to have. It raises rates higher than they otherwise would be for the same level of investment. And this is something apparently that is so valuable to the utilities, they're willing to give up other things to keep this going. But it is novel, it is unprecedented, and I think it deserves to be studied and not just granted as a right into perpetuity. The law has started taking, we've had one rate case under this new regime. It ended in a settlement with, I guess, Ameren, Missouri's electric rates just recently went up 8.8%. But we're just getting started. And based on this law, rates are going to continue to ramp up. And I'm sure the next rate case will be even more impactful. So we've just started. We haven't even yet seen the really big investments that were coming up here. The analysis in 2018 from the Public Service Commission staff was that this law was going to result in rates being 10 to 15% higher than otherwise. And so I believe what passed in 2018 was a double-digit rate increase. This, undoing the sunset, will expand that further. And without getting into it too much, there are rate caps in this legislation to protect large consumers, very large industrial consumers. And we haven't reached those rate caps yet, just getting started with this. There's a 2.5% and a 2.85% cap for these large customers. But under the law, once that cap is reached for these very large industrial customers, the excess then gets subsidized by the other customer classes. And so that's the residential customers and the small business customers at some point will wind up subsidizing the big industrial customers. So the big guys, big customers, they aren't as concerned because they're capped.
Was that under the previous law?
Yes,
Yeah, there was a
I would point.
Was it 2.8?
Yeah,
if I remember right.
Yes, there's, but essentially there is a cap on this PISA, the impact of PISA on the big customers, and it's very clear that that's going to be subsidized. When you remove the sunset, that expands that further, and presumably these large customers aren't going to be hit with anything further. Now, some of this economic development stuff is good from a consumer perspective. Sometimes it isn't. But there are several changes going on in here that will open up consumers, make consumers, that is residential consumers, more vulnerable to subsidizing and picking up more of, of the pie on this law. So I would, if you're going to reopen this again, I would certainly beg you to consider some type of rate protection or some kind of rate cap for ordinary customers. If there is a reason to shield these big industrial customers, I would say that residential customers deserve some kind of a cap or some kind of a regulator to keep this from going out of control. Otherwise, the only protection we have is that we are going to pause after this has been implemented, and we've seen 5 years of investment, and we're going to analyze the data and see if it's going to produce a lot of these other savings that have been sort of vaguely promised. So that would be the heart of it. Although there's probably 5 or 6 things in here that sort of tilt the scales, in the favor of the utility or in the favor of industrials, and it all seems to come downhill on ordinary customers. So I would beg you to be mindful of your decisions here and what impact they have on your constituents, on ordinary residential customers. That's all.
Any questions for this witness? Representative McQuarrie, proceed.
Thank you. So it seems like a lot of what this legislation is trying to do is it's sort of a continuation of that bill that was passed in 2018. Can you remind us about how that was phased in? So, if I remember right, there was like an illusion that rates were rates maybe went down, but it felt like it's because the bill hadn't kicked in. So can you remind me how that happened? Because I feel like there was a ramping up period.
There was, I suppose, an unrelated thing related to the corporate tax reductions.
Okay.
That were passed on to consumers.
Okay, so
early, and they would have happened, but they were put in a little early at the same time as this legislation passed.
And part of that was in other states, the utilities went ahead and just voluntarily, proactively gave the taxes back to their ratepayers, but that was connected to this bill, acting like that we had to pass this bill in order for the utilities to return the taxes.
It was done in a variety of ways, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes ordered in other states, and by now it's all been adjusted.
Okay.
Ultimately, the rates catch up to that.
Okay,
And,
very good. So the takeaway on this, though, is that PISA, that plant
in-service accounting, PISA.
That has
and
not
that is,
kicked in
and
yet.
it is, there are a lot of different mechanisms in other states, but this is, as far as I know, unique to Missouri. Now, I might be corrected, but I've not seen anything like this.
Okay.
And it just gives a little bit extra compensation. It goes back and gives them extra money for the time leading up to the rate case. But anyway, that's
Okay. Thank
hard
you.
to explain without getting into.
No, I just feel rusty on this because I feel like, we talked about this 3 years ago, and now all of a sudden I'm trying to remember what PISA is. So,
Right.
very good.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I think the main takeaway here is that we're not happy with this law, but we are open to seeing what happens. We would hope that you would also be open to evaluating and looking at the data and seeing what the impact is on consumers after 5 years of experience, and not open the floodgates at this point. So it is in effect, but we really haven't seen the true impact just yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Anyone now in favor of this legislation?
Chairman and committee members, my name is Warren Wood, and I'm Ameren, Missouri's Vice President of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs. Thank you for this opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 1734. In 2018, when the predecessor to this bill, Senate Bill 564, was passed, there were concerns that electric rates would substantially increase. We now have 3 years of experience having implemented the Smart Energy Plan enabled by this legislation, can now discuss what has actually happened. Simply put, Ameren, Missouri's customers are realizing significant benefits from the passage of Senate Bill 564. Our Smart Energy Plan, enabled by this landmark energy policy legislation, has begun modernizing our aging grid while improving reliability and resiliency for the customers that we serve. The benefits of this legislation go well beyond grid modernization, however. Missourians, not just Ameren, Missouri's customers, are benefiting from the legislation in at least 3 other significant ways. First, we're investing with Missouri suppliers wherever possible. Approximately 56% of our Smart Energy Plan contractors, suppliers are Missouri-based, so that we're investing directly with Missouri businesses where possible for more jobs, better jobs, and economic development. Second, the legislation includes one of the most competitive economic development incentives in the nation. These incentives have attracted dozens of businesses in Missouri and put thousands of Missourians to work. Third, these investments have created millions of additional tax dollars to provide for communities to invest in their schools, police and fire departments, and other needed services. And while all of this has been happening, our electric rates have remained well below Midwest and national averages. In fact, over the last 5 years, our rates have gone down twice and up once, with a total increase of 2% over 5 years. So why are we here supporting this legislation? Our support for this legislation is driven by our desire to continue the benefits of the Smart Energy Plan, but go beyond its current expiration at the end of 2023, absent renewal and extension. We also see several opportunities for improvement. First, to boost economic prosperity, the current economic development incentive should be expanded to allow more businesses looking to expand to relocate to Missouri to qualify, extended to avoid the current expiration in 2023, and create momentum as our economy enters the recovery phase of the COVID economic downturn, and streamlined to make it easier for businesses to qualify for the incentives. When Senate Bill 564 was passed in 2018, rate increase concerns prompted the current rate cap, one of the very few in the country, and from what we've been able to determine, the most aggressive in terms of its wide consideration of multiple price risk outside of our control. We, however, committed to remain under that cap when we agreed to the bill in 2018 through 2023, and we stand on that commitment. This bill does nothing to change that. I'm certain I don't need to spend the committee's time describing multitude of cost risks impacting every aspect of our economy now that were not present in 2018. Supply chain delays, labor, fuel, material cost increases, inflation risk, potential for federal tax increases, and extensive changes in regulations, to name just a few. These significant cost escalators place the future execution of our Smart Energy Plan at risk. To address this risk and still provide consumer protection of a cap, this legislation places a hard cap on the impacts of the capital cost deferrals specifically authorized by this legislation. So this legislation enables PISA, which, by the way, is far from extraordinary. The mechanisms in many other states are far more comprehensive in their cost recovery. But this legislation enables PISA, and then it places a cap on the effect of that PISA deferral in future customer rates. So that's where the cap is put in this legislation. And it would cap that rate impact of cost deferrals at 2.5% per year. Now with that, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify in support of this legislation. I welcome any questions you may have.
Any questions of this witness? Representative Lewis?
So the 2.5% cap on annual rate impacts, is that for both industrial consumers and for traditional consumers?
Excellent question. I took a couple of notes from the last testimony, but I would say this legislation removes the industrial versus other people cap altogether. It's completely gone from this legislation. So there is no differentiation between residential, commercial, industrial. The cap applies equally across all. So that special group for industrial caps is gone in this bill.
So before it was 2.85% on the
Everybody, and 2% on the industrials.
Right, and this is kind of cuts in the middle and into
It's a
the
2.5 for everybody, but it's on the PISA deferral as opposed to overall rates.
So if we had an 8.8% PSE rate increase for Ameren and UE just come down the pipe,
Yes.
no more than 2 point, well, in this case, it would
85%.
have been 2.85% in the old
Under the
calculation.
Under the current,
Right.
current legislation,
Right.
it goes back to there was accounting for a tax change and all of that, but, but 2.85% average annual change. So if you haven't had any rate changes in 2 or 3 years, you may have 2.85 times a couple of years as to what your cap would be. Okay?
I have some questions for you, sir. I know you're referring to page, I don't know if you have the bill in front of you there.
Jim Lowry with me here does.
Yes. Your trustee assistant,
Yeah,
page 13.
he's way smarter than I am, so
Yeah.
that's what I have here.
On page 13, starting in 31 through 40. For some reason, I did not remember that as a total rate cap on everybody. So I'm trying to read this real quick. This is like one of those for deja vu where we're trying to go back through the bill from 4 years ago. So I'd like for that to be clarified to make sure that what you just said is applicable across industrial and consumers, residential.
Mr. Chairman, if I can address that. So the current rate cap applies, it's a 2.85% compound annual growth rate, as Mr. Wood was describing. So if you're out 3 years, you take 2.85 times 3, and that'd be your cap in that rate case. And it's only a 2% cap on the industrials, under the current cap. Under this legislation, that cap continues through the end of 2023, and then it goes away. But it's replaced by what I'll call the PISA impact cap. So it's replaced by 2.5% cap on the impact of the PISA deferrals. And that 2.5% impact cap, there's no differentiation between industrials and residential or any other class. So when Mr. Kaufman said the legislation, could create a subsidy for industrials because if let's say the CAGR is 2.85 and the industrials are capped at 2, and you have that difference that gets spread to residentials. That's true under the current legislation that would remain through the end of 2023. That is not true under this new legislation. There is no differentiation. So we're replacing the current cap with a new cap starting 1/1/24 that does not have any opportunity for subsidization of the industrial class. Everybody is subject to that same cap.
Okay.
And that's in 1656. So it's the new statute. If you look on page, I guess it starts on page 15 at the numbering starts over on mine. It's right after line 106. 393-1656 is the new PISA impact cap that kicks in on 1/1/24.
All right. I have another question for you. What would be the impact if I'm going to give you my hesitation is that when the original bill was passed in 2018, was it?
That's right.
Sessions kind of blurring together around here. There was a sunset in here, and it was provided in here by a certain senator, and we all honored that request for him to have a sunset on all of this. Here we are 4 years later, and we're asking to not honor that. It kind of concerns me as a legislator to make sure that if I'm going to make sure something works, I don't want the guys behind me as soon as I'm gone to come in and take that away. So I can tell you right now, I'm very hesitant, if not at all adamant, that we're not going to change the sunset. I think we need to honor past agreements. So what would be the impact if we don't set a sunset on this? We let it stay. What do you think the impact for you?
A couple different things. Let me talk about that. So first of all, regarding what happened in 2018, I mean, we agreed that it would end in 2023, absent renewal and extension. But the initial 5-year commitment was 2.85% cap, stay below it for 5 years through the end of 2023. We stay with that. What we do have a problem with now is there's no ability in the legislation to modify the 2.85% overall cap. And as I've listed out, there's a bunch of escalations in costs since 2018 that none of us could have guessed 2018.
But you made this agreement in 2018. You guys made that agreement to say yes. Mm-hmm. Now you're coming back and saying, well, maybe not.
through the end of 2023. And so we're staying on that one. Then if it's the commission wants to do an evaluation of it, assess PISA, well, in every rate review, and including the one we just came through with the Public Service Commission, all of the investments made, including all the ones subject to PISA, are subject to a broad prudence review and challenge. And so it's not like there isn't an ongoing opportunity in the regulatory process in every one of our rate reviews to look at all of those and determine if they were prudent and if PISA was appropriate or calculated or not, and if it was prudent. And so, I would say, but you asked the question. Let me ask the question. Answer it. What's the impact? So, in looking at when we went into 2018, we knew there was a 5-year trial period. We're in that 5-year trial year period, past the midpoint of it, approaching the end of it, the end of next year. It's been very successful, as I've indicated, all the different things, how well rates.
And why
have
do you
been
want to
controlled.
change it?
Yeah, it's the price cost escalation issues and the opportunities for improving the economic development incentive. And so if you look at especially now with the supply delays we're dealing with, if you don't know that you have a longer term before your sunset, like right now, substations used to take 12 to 18 months. Maybe they take 3 to 4 years now. By the time you get a substation designed, you issue the requirements to buy the transformer and all that. If you have a 3, 4, 5-year sunset now, you're already going to have to start cutting back on projects years before you get to the end of that sunset because of the way the scheduling works.
But if you're cutting back on projects, then you're not spending the money.
And you're reducing your rate of accelerating grid modernization. We have a lot of old equipment out there that we really need to be getting into.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but it's one of those things that when I'm sitting on this side of the desk and we've made an agreement that somebody comes behind us and then decides, well, we're going to change that agreement. You made this agreement in good faith in 2018 to go to 2028. I can tell you right now, I think it's a dangerous principle when we sit around and we start changing these things, because that just means that, I can make an agreement today. Yeah, we're going to carry that for the next 10 years. And then as soon as you're gone and the senator that did this is gone, we're going to come back in and get a new set of legislators that don't have the history and don't know that. And now we're going to change that. So that sets that principle that, hey, whatever date you want to make is great. We'll set that because in 2 years you're gone and somebody else comes in and we're going to change it. That's my concern. I'm not trying to be argumentative or nasty. I'm just saying, from my point of view on this side of the desk, you made an agreement. We all accepted that agreement. We voted on that agreement. And I have yet to see the extenuating circumstances. I know the supply chain issues, but I'm still not convinced that the argument is there to change the date. I'm just concerned about how we do that. I think everybody on my side would agree that if you've made an agreement and you're gone in 2 years, that somebody shouldn't come in and change that agreement afterwards.
I understand your perspective completely. I look at it a little differently, as you can imagine. I look at it.
I would expect you to.
I would say we've certainly.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't.
The conditions in 2018, we didn't know COVID, the pandemic, the supply, there's been a lot of dramatic things, the highest inflation in 40 years now. We're looking at it and going, this has been highly successful in its initial trial period. Rate costs have been very favorable. You look at us compared to national Midwest, our numbers are very good on electric rates. Economic development, there's opportunities for improvement. But we want to come back and talk to the policymakers, you all, and say, hey, we can't argue that things haven't changed dramatically. Let's talk about how we go about trying to address the changes that have occurred and still keep this smart energy plan working to benefit Missouri.
All right, we'll need to talk about this further because I'm not convinced yet that, never let a good crisis go to waste. And so that's my concern here, is that I really need to be convinced that why we should change these dates. So I'm just telling you that right up front.
Understand.
To be very honest about, I'm really hesitant about changing these dates. We made a promise. We need to keep our promises. So we'll talk about that, and we'll share that with the committee, but that's my concern. So any other questions for this witness?
Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the commission or the committee, I was going to try to address a couple questions. Representative Bromley had a question
Could you
about
please
the EEI.
identify yourself, please, for the
My
record?
name's Jim Lowry, and I'm also with Ameren. So,
And have you filled out witness forms?
I have, yes,
Okay.
I have. Thank you. So, Representative Bromley, I think you were asking about, and maybe there was a couple questions in there, but there were questions about the Bitcoin people coming along and how that would work. So as I think was testified to earlier, you've got to have state, local, regional economic development incentives to qualify. And that, if I can probably find the reference here, but if you don't have those, you cannot get the economic development incentives under this bill. So if the state or the local look at this particular operation and think it's worth those incentives, which they probably wouldn't do with a Bitcoin mining operations, then you can do it. But in that case, you wouldn't have it. A couple other things that are really important. These incentive levels, these discounts are set so that they will cover and contribute to the utility's fixed costs. So they are above, they make a contribution to fixed costs. So every billing unit that these folks are generating incremental to what we have today is going to lower rates for everybody else. And I think there was a question asked, I think it was perhaps you, Representative Bromley, about, well, how do we be sure that happens? Every year the utility has, under the statute as proposed, every year the utility has to annually verify that that customer that signed that EDI contract is meeting those requirements, meaning the load factor, et cetera. And if they're not, they get kicked off of it. So we're not going to have a situation where they said they're going to have a 50% load factor and they're only 30 and now they're not contributing to fixed cost. They're going to get kicked off the discount. And lastly, if as a backstop, every time the utility has a rate case, if you have these contracts and the utility's cost structure has changed so much that the discount is too great, and that there's a lot of cushion built in these numbers, so that's unlikely to happen. But if it does, the commission can actually cancel the EDI contract in a rate case and say, look, the utility's cost structure has just gone up so much that the discount's too deep. And so the commission has the backstop to prevent that from happening. So there's some safeguards built in that should prevent these customers who are bringing incremental load. It's not, they have to bring incremental load to get it. There's backstops built in to make sure that the discount is not hurting other customers. In fact, it's helping other customers in almost every, it should be in every circumstance.
Any questions for this witness? Representative Bromley?
To inquire. I just want to clarify, I didn't mention anything on Bitcoin. I know nothing about Bitcoin.
Sorry, I confused it with another question.
So I did hear that word come up. But after you go through and your utility reviews these different customers that come in, and you either decide they have met their requirements or they have not met what they projected up front. So let's say that they're still making progress, but they haven't quite hit their load factors and they haven't quite, built to the level of usage that they projected. At that point, do you have the ability, instead of kicking them off, can you modify these agreements at that point, or do you just kick them off and start again with them? Or how does that process work in order to make sure that they're following through on their part of this?
Well, I think the design is that you do that annual review, so they basically got that year to get ramped up. And then if they don't make it, the contracts, I think, can't, and there's some latitude, and the commission actually ends up approving a specific tariff that gets into some of the details you're talking about. I think there would be some latitude to temporarily kick them off, and they come back the next annual period that they could kick back, they could then start back up, I guess if they're having production problems or employment problems. But I think part of the reason that we're proposing to change these tiers and the structure of these discounts is we found, like, the first tier of the newly proposed discount has a lower load factor, somewhat smaller discount. But what we're finding is, particularly out in rural Missouri or some of these areas, they have a really tough time running 3 shifts. So they can't get to the load factor. But they can run 2 shifts and get to the load factor. So we're hoping not to have some of those circumstances that you're talking about, because it's a little easier to qualify, but the discount is also smaller and it's still set in a way that there shouldn't be a subsidy. So I think there's some flexibility to put them back on, but at that annual review, if they haven't made it, they're going to be off for a year. They're going to have to be off for a year and then redemonstrate whether they got there or not.
So when you decide to kick them off because they haven't met their performance requirements or their load factors or whatever, when does the Public Service Commission intervene and change that tariff? Is that something that they have to wait for the next rate case, or is that something that, how does that all work? Or are you flexible and you can do that internal before the next tariff case?
We can, because what happens is the customer signs. So we have to determine that they qualify based on their projections. Let's say they're, build a new plant. We have to determine they qualify. Then they sign a contract, and it reflects what those terms are. It has to be inconsistent with the statute. That contract gets filed with the Public Service Commission, but the Public Service Commission doesn't do anything with it per se, but they have it. And then we apply that contract. So if the contract term says you were supposed to be A and B and you didn't make it, under the contract, we have the right to prospectively stop that. Now, if we didn't follow that contract, that customer could file a complaint at the commission and say, just like if we didn't follow our tariff, and could say, look, Ameren, you know, I made it, or the contract says this doesn't happen, but Ameren did this. They would have a remedy at the commission. But short of, as long as we follow the contract, we do have the latitude to implement the terms of that contract.
And then I know in any contract, they have the ability to challenge that at any time. Like their engineers may say that we think we're meeting this, and your engineers say, well, we don't think
Right.
you met the contract. Does this stay in effect until all those challenges would be over, or what historically, I guess, are you seeing customers just say, hey, yeah, we understand, we're done out here? I'm sure you've had some failures with this in your 3 or 4 years here since 18.
Well, I don't know the answer to those questions that you asked me. I'm not aware of any failures. Maybe.
Yeah, there haven't been a lot of conflicts in terms of the understanding of the numbers. They're looking at the same metering data we are.
Okay, that sounds great. If there's
Load factor is a fairly objective thing. I mean, you've got a capacity of your plant, and you've got how much electricity you took in a period. You can pretty well calculate it.
And last question on that load factor, there's a 55% load factor in here in some of this language. That seems like a pretty high load factor to me for a lot of these, businesses. And then is that on an annual basis, or is that load factor, is that flexible? Or, on an annual basis, 55% seems extremely high to me.
Well, and you're right, and that's part of the problem. Under the current legislation, it is 55. Under this bill on page 10, which is the House version, it still says 55. That's a mistake. In the Senate bill, it's 45%, and it's supposed to be 45%. So it's my understanding that's going to be picked up in the House committee sub. But that was one of the issues, is that's that second and third shift issue. 55% is probably too high, and that's one of the reasons we want to make the improvements. So it should be 45%. That's what the ultimate legislation would provide for. And
so when I would ever calculate load factor, I would say that if they're going to use 5 megawatts, 2.5 megawatts would be 50%.
Right. And I think you might have asked, period. It's an annual number. It's an annual calculation.
And so I still find 45% load factor on a continuous basis year after year. I would find that a hard performance matrix for most of these places to meet. And you're telling me that most of these places can meet those, or do you have flexibility if they don't meet that, say 1 year, but the following year they do meet that? Or how I just see where there's, some of these factories, they retool every year or every other year and different things. And so could they be in compliance 2 or 3 years, then not in compliance? And it just seems like that's a tough matrix to monitor, keep track of, and make sure that everybody's in compliance. And so I'm hearing you're saying it's not tough for you guys.
I'm not aware of us having problems in that regard, but in terms of getting down to some of those fine administrative things, I honestly can't.
Okay.
I don't have the knowledge to get quite at that level with you, but we certainly have other folks that could do it with you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Anyone now? Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Anyone now to speak against the legislation? Mr. Coffin, I can't believe you're the only one. Anyone now in favor of the legislation?
Permission to approach?
Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and Committee. It's good to see you all this morning. My name is Jason Clint. I'm the Senior Director for Economic Development and Government Affairs at Evergy. Since this is my first time in front of the committee this year, let me just remind you that Evergy is some of you may remember it more as Kansas City Power and Light. However, Evergy joined with Westar in 2018 to create one company known as Evergy. We are not in Evergy. I understand there's usually some business before this committee with them, but we are an IOU that serves all of western Missouri and all of Kansas. And so, Mr. Chairman, I brought some handouts to briefly walk through, as I thought maybe that would break up the monotony of listening to me talk. And so Evergy has elected to use PISA, the mechanism from Senate Bill 564. We elected to do that in 2019. And we have been successful at modernizing the grid. On slide 2, you'll see an example of a transmission line rebuild in both Northwest Missouri and in Blue Springs. It improves resiliency by replacing the older assets with stronger, newer components. We've also used PISA to upgrade substation equipment, as you'll see there on slide 3. We're replacing older assets that are past their replacement date to improve the reliability and with advanced capabilities. On slide 4, it shows how PISA has impacted reliability for customers by replacing distribution poles and underground infrastructure. On slide 5, simply how we're using Senate Bill 564 toward these priorities. You'll note that in the 2001 iteration of our IRP docket, more than 70% of the spend goes directly toward grid hardening and reliability. Senate Bill 564 has been a success as we look at infrastructure investment that is enabled. Customers have benefited, including lower operating cost, enhanced grid resiliency, and quicker outage response times. However, the job's not done, and that's why we support House Bill 1734. We continue to have outdated assets that need upgrades. Slide 6 shows the current age of many of those assets and their life expectancy. As you can see, particularly in circuits, poles, overhead conductors, and transformers, there is still plenty of work to be done. And as you can see on slide 7, if we do not execute our plan, the duration of outages, and that's what SAIDI stands for, it goes up dramatically. Customers will have longer waits for their lights to come back on. And even with all that investment that you've seen over the last 3 years, we're talking about 2% of our system is all that's being upgraded on an annual basis. So additionally, Mr. Chairman, this bill has other components in it. Evergy supports the economic development rates in the bill. Evergy has successfully used rates like these to attract $158 million in new investment in Missouri, and it helped dozens of Missouri companies call home. This accounts for some 3,000 new jobs in logistics, manufacturing, data centers, healthcare, and food processing. So for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, we support House Bill 1734.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Anyone else in favor of the legislation?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Rich Albush. I'm a contract lobbyist for Liberty Utilities. We were Empire, now Liberty. Liberty is our main name. We were purchased by Algonquin. We are a smaller investor-owned utility based out of Joplin, so we do some service in Kansas, small area. We also do service for electrical, water, and also we do gas. So we are very interested in PISA. We did elect to do PISA years ago. It has been beneficial for our customers to be able accelerated improvements. The EDR that you see in this particular legislation, I think, is more in tune with what is helpful for our customers for economic development. That's not something that we've been very strong in our area down in southwest Missouri to be able to invite new customers. And I represent other industries as well. You know, we talked about these EDRs. They need to be off the shelf. And let me understand that concept. You need something that you could point to in a book to a site selector and say, this is a good rate. This is a good deal. And for someone to come to Missouri, you know, to be able to do what's called the EDR, to have something that's not off the shelf is very difficult. So you have to go through these, you know, complicated deals to be able to come up with some better rate. We believe this is actually beneficial to have in statute, an EDR that someone who is a site selector can point to say, this is a good deal. Let's go to this area of the state. Let's invest millions of dollars and go to Missouri. We have a lot of competition, you know, for jobs. We'd like to, you know, to be helpful for us in Southwest Missouri, and we believe that this will help right size that EDR for our area of the state as well. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else in favor of the legislation? Don't forget to fill out witness forms, please.
Morning, Chairman and Committee. My name is James Farrar. I'm an operations manager with BBC Electric.
How do you spell your last name, sir?
My last name is spelled Farrar.
Thank you.
Again, I'm an operations manager with BBC Electric. We are an overhead line distribution and transmission underground contractor based out of Joplin, Missouri. We're a family-owned power line contractor. Our primary focus is in the construction and maintenance of power lines for electric utilities, co-ops, city municipalities. Most of our work is in the Midwest, but our crews do travel all over the country, helping utilities, co-ops, when natural disasters come aboard, whether it be a hurricane, ice storm. For example, we have some very bad weather coming through the Midwest now, and our crews are going to be mobilizing to prepare for any kind of outages from the winter weather. We've been in business for 17 years. Right now, we currently employ just over 250 employees company-wide. BBC Electric started working for Ameren in 2019 after the original passage of the SEP Smart Energy Plan. Our first job that we were successful enough to win through the bid process was to install what we call distribution automation devices. These are switching devices and protection that is put out on the line. It's a very smart, highly technical devices. It's actually considered in our industry as self-healing. The storms come through, cars hit a pole, trees grow into the lines, fall, whatever the problem may be, these devices actually, through technology and sensors, sense where the problem is and will actually open different areas and isolate the damage and automatically remotely bring the power back on. When you're at home and you see your lights flicker and 2 seconds later they're back on, this is part of that technology out in the field doing what it was installed to do. And since this bill took place and we started doing this, I can't tell you the exact number, but we've installed several hundreds of these different devices. This is considerable asset when a storm moves through. So that was how we originally got the opportunity to work for Ameren, and since that opportunity, through the increased grid infrastructure improvements, we've been able to do projects all the way down from a single pole replacement in a customer's backyard to rebuilding entire circuits from the substation all the way across town to the end of the line. We've been able to convert overhead power lines to underground in areas of Excelsior Springs, of course in St. Louis, down in the southeast region near Cape Girardeau and Dexter. We're actually right here in town replacing wood poles, as we call them, H structures, sub-transmission. We're actually replacing those to a composite type pole that is more resilient to windstorms, ice storms, and longer lasting life. We're installing what we call an OPGW. It's an optical. It's the same thing that everybody hears in the news, fiber optic. We're actually installing fiber optic from substation to substation, where one day if we can continue to pass this and extend this bill, we can continue to install this fiber optic and one day maybe have all substations interconnected through a fiber optic system where we're not relying on what we call a SCADA, a wireless system where bad weather, cloudy, trees, you may not have that communication. It's all through a fiber optic secure network. The opportunity to work for Ameren has also given us opportunities to give back to the communities that we serve. By actually working for Ameren, we were able to take some of our profits and our workforce, and for example, right here in Jeff City, we're able to relocate some steel towers to help accommodate building the Adrian's Island Bridge. Using our workforce and our equipment. By picking up this work, we've bought several millions of dollars in equipments and tools. For example, in 2018, this bill was passed, our payroll for the state of Missouri was $2.8 million. The end of last year, 2021, we had just over $22 million in payroll for the state of Missouri employees. We worked all over the country, but by this bill being passed, we were able to bring some of those employees home from states like Ohio and Indiana, actually get them a job close to their family working in the state of Missouri. So we are here today because we are in support of this bill passing again. not only to make our grid stronger, but to continue good paying jobs in the state of Missouri. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Anyone else in favor of the legislation? And there are many of us here who have a meeting at 9 o'clock, so
Very briefly, Andy Arnold here on behalf of
Thank you.
Spire in support of the legislation.
thank you, sir. Any questions for this witness? Representative McQuarrie.
Quick question. The bill sponsor said that Spire wanted that section taken out, that first.
First section on weatherization, yes.
So
It would be
it's
the
because of the
existing law.
weatherization part of it?
It would be the existing law is what we would maintain the ability to adjust the rates that way.
Okay.
And then the other issue is the the tracker, the tax tracker. We want to be included in the tax tracker as well.
Okay, so weatherization and tax tracker.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone else in favor of the legislation?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Matt Borman. I'm the CEO of Western Smokehouse, a manufacturer of premium, better-for-you meat snacks based in Green Top, Missouri, just north of Kirksville. Our company was founded in 1978 as a local butcher shop. We now produce over 1 million meat snacks per day for more than 30 large brands. You can find our meat snacks in almost every big box, club store, full-line grocery, natural grocery in the nation. Western employs about 350 people, with approximately half in Missouri, which will be growing this year with our newest expansion of the Green Top, Missouri facility. We're currently finishing our second project that was made possible by Ameren Missouri's Smart Energy Plan. The first project was completed in 2019, with the second finishing in 2022. The economic development incentive portion of the Smart Energy Plan has helped us to nearly double our square footage and double our workforce in Missouri. Our products require extended cook times that must be consistent to hit USDA metrics for shelf stability and product quality, so we also have to have a consistent and reliable electricity source every single day. The state of Missouri and Ameren Missouri's investments in the electrical grid have been essential to that reliability and consequently our ability to grow. In addition, the incentives offered through the Smart Energy Plan have directly caused us to prioritize existing building expansion in Missouri versus adding locations or expanding in neighboring states. We had found an ideal location in a neighboring state before our latest expansion, but we would have been required to purchase significant electrical upgrades and also upgrade the local substation. That's in addition to already having higher electricity prices by about 30% in that state. We compared that to expanding in Missouri, where in addition to state incentives to add jobs right here, Ameren Missouri upgraded our on-site equipment, ensured there was sufficient service to the facility, and provided a further incentive for increased electricity consumption. The stark difference in the support for increased energy usage was the most significant aspect in our decision to add jobs in Missouri versus relocate our new plant to another state. We want to keep our business growing in small towns where jobs are needed, so Missouri's investment in improving reliability throughout the state is essential to determining where we grow next. The demand for our products remains extremely strong, and we're going to continue to build capacity and add jobs to our business. The passage of House Bill 1734 extending beyond 2023 will ensure that our company growth and future job growth stays right here in Missouri. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you adding jobs in Missouri. Any questions for this witness? Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming. Anyone? Yep, there we go.
I'll be brief. Kara Corches on behalf of the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In support, we have longstanding policy to support continuously upgrading and modernizing our utility infrastructure. We think that it makes the grid both more reliable and resilient, which are both very important qualities for attracting and retaining businesses in the state.
All right, thank you. Any questions for this witness? Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. My name is Luz Rondon Haberberger. I am the president and founder of Luzco Technologies. Luzco is an electrical engineering firm. We do substation, transmission, and distribution engineering design for electric utilities. So I came here today because I wanted to share my story. I launched the firm 5 years ago, June of 2017, out of a dream of building something different, a result-driven company that was not only customer-centric, but also provided a different work-life environment for my employees. I'm one of the success stories of Ameren because of this legislation. I ended up in 2017 with 5 employees. 5 years later, now I have 58. So that's 53 new jobs that we were able to provide in Missouri because of the legislation. Not only that, the company has been able to pay it forward through charitable contributions. We donated over $90,000 to not-for-profit in the state of Missouri. Any questions for me?
Thank you again very much. Any questions for this witness? Thanks for taking the time to come here.
Good morning. My name is Kurt Schultz. I'm an executive board member of the Electrical Board of Missouri and Illinois. We're the trade association for all the different trades, electrical industry in eastern Missouri and southern Illinois. We were established in 1909. Our membership has 210 corporate members, and that equates to 500 individual members. Our members from all facets of the industry: manufacturers, agents, architects, engineers, wholesale distributors, integrators, inspectors, students, utility, commercial, and industrial end users. In addition to the products, our members sell thousands of products from the turbine all the way to the receptacle in your house where you plug your phone in at night. And in addition to those products, we provide services such as the engineering, construction, installation, and maintenance of electrical, residential, commercial, and industrial projects. Ameren Missouri Smart Energy Plan has provided countless projects for members in all phases: planning, design, construction, procurement. And not only do they impact the livelihoods and the projects and spending that we have there, Ameren partners with our member companies to help them deliver a safe and reliable power to all Ameren customers. EBMI supports the expansion and extension of the Smart Energy Plan and the passage of House Bill 1734. It's needed because some of the parts of the grid are actually older than I am, and I'm 54. Since the bill was originally passed in 2018, Ameren has invested in improving most of the most critical components of the grid, but there's much more to be replaced. When extended, Ameren Missouri can continue to plan improvements well into the future. Ameren is not only a customer to many of our members, but more importantly, they provide safe and reliable power to our customers, which provides more than jobs, but careers in the electrical industry. Thank you.
Have you filled out a witness form, sir?
I did.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for this witness? Thank you, sir.
Good morning. My name is Trey Code, owner of SCI Engineering. SCI Engineering is a firm of 175 employees headquartered out of St. Charles, Missouri, where we began in 1978. We offer consulting and engineering services during site selection, design, and construction. We engage regularly with owners, developers, engineers, architects, and contractors, including those associated with the business of energy generation and distribution. Missouri continues to see investments by out-of-state corporations and people that want to live and work in Missouri. My company's professional staff has the opportunity to consult with new and existing business owners who are looking to grow and expand, and Missouri's reliable power infrastructure is a key component in that decision. The enhancements and upgrades that we have seen to our energy systems over the past several years is an important part of supporting that trend. We're grateful to have supported Ameren on upgrading their distribution lines, and these types of investments have helped my company invest in staff and the diversity of our service offerings. Our staff and their families live in some of the most urban areas of Missouri as well as some of the most rural areas, and reliability and efficiency that the Smart Energy Plan offers allows us to be flexible and a preferred employer while also being competitive. As our company grows, like so many others, so will our reliance on a stable and confident energy grid. Myself and my partners fully support House Bill 1734, and my company supports Ameren in these efforts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for this witness? Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Trey Davis, registered lobbyist, president of Missouri Energy Development Association. We represent the state's largest investor-owned utilities, electric, gas, and water. Just wanted to go on record in support.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for this witness? Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Philip James. I'm the general manager of WEG Transformers in Washington, Missouri, in Franklin County. We started in business there. Our business has been there since the 1960s, but WEG bought the business in August of 2017. We currently operate 3 manufacturing facilities in Washington, Missouri. We produce power transformers, distribution transformers, substation transformers, And then we also have a significant presence in the renewable energy business as well. And also, too, to add on to not supporting Ameren, there were also representatives from Liberty Utilities and Evergy here today. Both are significant customers of WEG Transformers there. We currently employ almost 500 employees in Franklin County. Our business is growing substantially. I just mentioned that we had 3 factories. We started that 3rd factory up in October last year, and we are currently in process right now on March 29th, in just a few days. We'll have a gold shovel groundbreaking ceremony, of a significant expansion of our power transformer business in Washington. We see significant growth, and we are an absolute supporter of the Smart Energy Plan. In my written testimony that I'll be submitting at the back, I included a photograph of one of the substations that we provide the power transformer to Ameren for, which is the Madison substation, which is in my hometown of Washington. And it is, it's a power transformer built by Missourians for Missourians and being installed throughout the state. So as you'll see that in my written testimony, one significant aspect of this project that has already been said today that I want to reinforce: we work with utilities throughout North America, and we work heavily as well as we said with Ameren and also to Evergy and Liberty. The electrical infrastructure in the United States was heavily built out in the 1950s and the 1960s. There's much of the infrastructure, some in existence today, is still pre-World War II. There's a significant need to provide reliable power, not only to businesses, but I live in Missouri, and I pay my electric bill to Ameren. I live in Washington, and so it's a great bill to support not only economic growth, but also to support a reliable energy grid for the state of Missouri. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony. Any questions? Thank you, sir. I just want to remind everybody, make sure you fill out a witness form. Anyone else in favor of the legislation? Anyone last call for against the legislation? Anyone in favor for information purposes only? All right, seeing none, that'll conclude the hearing on House Bill 1734.